Welcome to the Campus Accelerator program, CAP. It was at one moment in time named the Fractal Accelerator program, but then we realized that that spelled FAP, so we decided to change the name to CAP. And then you'll see in the little right-hand corner there, that's Mandelbro, the friendly fractal. I'll let Priya actually introduce Mandelbro because she's technically its mother.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, Mandelbro just came to me in a dream one day, and he's been around ever since. He is a bro, but a very friendly bro. And yeah, if you ever feel lost, just look to Mandelbro.
So the theme of this initial presentation that we want to have come across is that really massive things tend to have really scrappy, humble beginnings. And that's true of almost anything you look at. So if you try to copy something that already looks big and impressive, that's often missing the initial conditions that made it grow. I have a friend who calls this the baby black swan problem, where you have lots of people who try to copy the final thing, but then the initial thing actually tends to look more messy and unimpressive and lame. Um, Not to say a baby elephant is lame. But Fractal at the very beginning did look kind of lame, and now it's this big burgeoning thing with hundreds of people involved and all sorts of stuff. And in that way, it's kind of like a lot of things throughout history, such as Burning Man, which today is this massive 70,000 person plus like pop up city that happens every year. Raise your hand if you've been to Burning Man. I run a camp there sometimes. Well, if you haven't been, it's worth witnessing at least once. It's like totally astonishing. But the way it started in 1986 was just 20 people on a beach burning a sculpture. Then there's the effective altruism movement. Have people heard of that? The majority, yeah. So this is a movement that prides itself on using reason and evidence to try to figure out how to do the most good. I was involved in its movement building for a little while. Today, it's freaking massive. It's got billions of dollars. It's got groups all over the world, tons of academic citations and influence. But back in 2013, when I joined the movement, it was just 50 nerds in a room. And this is the first time a bunch of the leaders got together, and then there was chemistry, and now you have this entire giant world spanning thing. Um, an example that's possibly more relevant to building neighborhood campuses like we're talking about is New York City's Chinatown. So I didn't know this before coming up with the course, but I researched a bunch of examples of things that had scrappy beginnings. And I found out that even though Chinatown looks like this now, and it's big, it's beautiful, they're able to like design it as their own kind of world with the aesthetics and signs in Chinese. But back in 1858, basically it was more or less one guy who got the whole thing rolling. This guy Ah Ken, he was a cigar salesman, and to fund his business, as you can see on the left there, he started a boarding house and then had Chinese immigrants stay at the boarding house. And then gradually people moved out, started their own businesses, opened their own apartments, brought their families over, and now it's the Chinatown that we know today. Um, Right. And so similarly, Fractal now, big impressive thing, perhaps. It has hundreds of events. We have this community run university. We have a tech hub full of co working and coding boot camps, a bunch of different venues, and housing all over the city, mostly Brooklyn. Um, and that's now. But Fractal, when it started, looked just like this. And you
Yeah,
want to kind of.
so this is our humble beginnings. So in the beginning, my husband and I moved to New York from San Francisco, and we had an apartment. It was a three-bedroom apartment that we shared with some friends, and we just gave it the name Fractal. We didn't really know what that was gonna mean, but we just thought it was fun to kind of give ourselves a name. On the right, that's one of our earliest Sunday dinners. As you can see, first of all, our house looks like super drab. It's like there's no color in there. It's kind of underwhelming. But two, there's not that many people there. And also, it took a while for us to kind of find the right people who kind of like were really bought into our vision and wanted to join and be long-term friends. And so when I look at this photo, I see two of my closest friends who have gone on to build a bunch of Fractal with us. But I also see a woman who moved back to Los Angeles, a guy who moved to San Francisco. So they're wonderful people, but they're obviously not here, not part of this thing. And then on the left-hand side, you can see like some hands. I cut that person out of the photograph on purpose because this is a psychopath who we had to kick out of our community. One of the first psychopaths we had to deal with, which is something you guys will probably deal with, especially if you do any sort of co-living or neighborhood building. But
I like that phrase. Just one of the first.
Exactly. Yes. That is. We'll go in future classes how to kind of deal with that. People who have major emotional problems and stuff, because that's kind of the secret sauce to making these things work instead of fall apart. But anyway, again, like our original dinners, they were not at all what they are today. And a couple other kind of events on the earlier side. So on the left-hand side, this is graduation from the very first class that we held, which was my friend's civics class. And there were like 8 students. We all ended up becoming close friends. But nowadays, a lot of our classes are much bigger, and we run way more classes. On the right-hand side is our first barn raising. Barn raising is this idea that you all get together and you help one or a few people launch their project or their business. So in this case, it was for a SaaS startup that I was running with Andrew. And as you can see, it's not that many people. There were probably like 10 people there. Whereas when we hosted a barn raising a couple years later for Fractal Tech Hub, we had over 100 people, and those people all contributed in major ways and really helped get the thing off the ground. And this is dinner, a couple months in. We kind of like had a whole color scheme with vibey lights and stuff, and it was fun. We had a good time. But again, it's maybe like 15 people, and we started doing these lightning talks, and that really brought people together. And so we kind of were growing and growing over time. Early on, we also, because we were trying to activate this social space and community, we basically told our friends and acquaintances that if anybody wanted to host something in our space, they were welcome to. And in New York, that's kind of a big deal because a lot of people's spaces are too small to host in, or they're just not comfortable hosting in their space for whatever reason. In this case, there was a friend of a friend who's an artist, and she wanted to host this like really playful painting event that was just like freeform, kind of finger painty, like let's get into our kid mind and stuff. And for us, we happen to live in this loft where kind of anything goes, and it was no big deal if we accidentally got some paint on the floor. So we told her, hey, come and host it here. And so that was kind of one of our early events. And then over time, as we hosted our regular weekly dinner, they started growing and growing and growing. And this is one of my favorite early Fractal stories, which is our friend Charlie. He got up to give a lightning talk, which was not necessarily a talk. You can also just kind of have the floor for 3 to 5 minutes. So while he had the floor, he said, I feel like a poet, and I write poetry all the time, but I've actually never shared my poems with anyone else. And I have this like split identity where I'm like a poet on the inside, but on the outside, my life looks totally different. And somebody else raised their hand and suggested that he go to Central Park that week with a table and a sign that says donation-based poetry, and he basically just write poems for a lot of people, just to kind of like get out of the fear and just like really just jump all in and start writing poetry. And then he came back the week after, and he came up to give a lightning talk, and he basically told us, last week I went and I wrote poetry in the park for donations. And I went for 2 days, and in that time I earned enough money to pay my rent and to pay back money that I owed my ex-girlfriend. So it turns out he was like really excellent at this. He was obviously a good poet. He'd been writing for a long time, but also he was good specifically at doing these on-the-spot poems and creating this whole experience for people. And so he quit his job, and he still is a full-time park poet, and now all these venues around the city hire him. And so basically lots of things like this kept happening, like really strange things were coming out of our dinner. People were quitting their jobs, people were forming really close friendships, people were getting into relationships. Another story that always comes to mind is a friend of mine showed up to dinner one night, and she was really depressed because her visa had just been denied. And then at that dinner, there was an immigration lawyer, and they kind of talked about her case, and then she started working with him long term. And then a couple months later, basically she got a visa and was able to stay here.
A funny anecdote on the Charlie front is sometimes I walk around New York City and I just randomly see him like in a park. He'll just be there typing on his not keyboard, what do you call it, typewriter. And I'll try to say hi to him, and he'll be like, I'm working. I'm like, oh, okay. the timeline.
Yes, the timeline. So this is kind of a simplified timeline, but it gives you a little bit of a sense. So Andrew and I moved here in 2021. We called our 3-bedroom apartment Fractal. Then like 6 months later, we started the first Fractal Sunday dinner. So that was just like a weekly event that we held. And then later that year, friends moved into 2 other apartments in our building. Then the next year, a small group of friends basically opened an apartment that was kind of double the size of the rest of our apartments, but in the same building. And they specifically made it into a living room third space, so everyone could show up basically at any time of day, and they could co-work there and hang out. And also people could host events there, which we were kind of already doing in our apartment, but our apartment, 1, was much smaller, and 2 was just like not as, like, we weren't as open about that. Whereas their apartment, that was like their, like, they really committed to it, and there was just like an explosion of events in our scene because of Merlin's Place. That was also the year that we started Fractal U. Our first Fractal U semester just had 4 classes. Now we offer 20 to 30 classes a semester. And then the year after that, we started our first commercial space, which is called Fractal Tech Hub, and it's a co-working space and a coding boot camp.
I forget if you mentioned, but where it says 1G opens, 1G was the name of the apartment, like on the outside, like the label, and then they named it Merlin's Place, and now people call it either 1G or Merlin's Place. Mm-hmm. So in those early days, I wouldn't say that there was much of a vision guiding the thing. It kind of grew organically on this almost like immigration style model. However, we've definitely found that as time has gone on, it's really helpful to have a vision, and a really ambitious vision, to figure out like what to build next and to fuel our desires. So our next section is going to be having you guys think about basically the thought experiment. If it goes wildly well, if it goes well beyond your wildest dreams, what might it look like in 5 or 10 years, something like that. So we'll spend 7 minutes journaling on these different prompts. Where will you be living in 10 years? And what will that look like? You know, is it going to be like its own aesthetic universe, like Chinatown? Or are you going to be at the top of a tower with a helicopter? Like, what's that? Are you going to be underwater? That would be cool. Who are you going to be with? I would be specific for this. Like, I would love, personally, I want my mom and my sister to live in the same multifamily unit with me. And I'm working on that. That's probably going to happen this year. What are you going to be doing on a Tuesday morning? And how has that changed by this vision? And then what's different about the neighborhood that you're living in? You added that. Do you want to extrapolate on that? What's different about the neighborhood?
Oh, I don't know. It's meant to be a kind of a broad, open-ended question, just to help kind of like seed your brain. You can interpret it however you like.
Okay, and we'll set a 7-minute timer. Find a notepad or a notes app or something like that, and we'll do some solo journaling. So, I thought I'd also share a little bit about my vision for less Fractal NYC, but more the course and also like the ecosystem in general. And it has 3 different parts. The first one is the idea that
Are you sharing your screen?
Oh, am I sharing my screen?
Do you want to just double check?
Can people see my screen? Raise your hand if you can. No, people can't see my screen. Okay, 1 second. Oh yeah, here we go. Make selection. Okay, how about now if you click watch stream? Nice. All right, I like that one, workflow sauce. Is that like a maybe? It's an enthusiastic yes. Okay.
Is there anyone who can't see the screen? Okay.
Okay, we're good. Okay, so yeah, the first component is the idea that you can create a new social form or a new pattern or template, whatever you want to call it. And it's been done before. So churches really only popped up in the 4th century. Town halls only came around with the rise of democracy and the decline of feudalism in the 12th century. Summer camps were basically created in 1861. And you can just create these. And we've kept doing it in the 21st century. We've created hackathons in the 2000s. Y Combinator popularized the form of the startup accelerator, and now there are dozens, or maybe even hundreds. And then with WeWork, we saw the proliferation of co-working spaces. And these were basically concepts that then were manifested in physical space, and then because they work so well, then they were just copied all over the place. And my hope is that something like a neighborhood campus, or whatever you want to call it, a fractal, is something that, for instance, when you come out of college, you move to a new city, and then you just try to find the local fractal. Or you realize that there's no neighborhood campus there, and then you start your own with your friends. That's number one. The second component of this is at the beginning of Fractal, we were very interested by this idea of scenius. Scenius is a word created by this guy, Brian Eno, who's a musician. It's a portmanteau of scene and genius. And the idea is that if you look throughout history of cases where we think that there are solitary geniuses, they tended to actually be in a milieu or even a close group of other people that we think of as geniuses. And so it kind of challenges this idea of the solitary genius and reveals that throughout history you actually have tons of cases of conditions creating perfect situations for collective intelligence. So you might know are Bell Labs, which is responsible for many modern inventions that we still use today, Y Combinator, which I just mentioned, and the Bloomsbury Group, which included a weird assortment of people, including the economist Keynes, and also I think Virginia Woolf was in it too. So that's number two. Number three is no big deal. I would love to solve the loneliness crisis. It's a gathering epidemic. The Surgeon General of the United States thinks so too. He came out with this report in 2023, and it turns out that isolation is associated with basically every major cause of death. And I just feel really sad also, like looking out across the states and beyond at my friends in other places, and when they don't have something like this, their life just seems like a lot worse. So I want to explode that crisis and reweave some social fabric. Oops. Is playing now? Okay. Oops. I'll preface this first before playing it. So it's hard. I'm hard pressed to come across visions of the future that I actually find very compelling, and it pains me to say that out of all the places where I did find one, it was in a Chobani commercial. Since it's kind of part of the visual part of the vision, this is like the thing that maybe comes closest, and I thought I would screen it. And here it is.
Dear Alice, this place is yours now. It's a handful, but nothing worth doing is easy. The land is more than just dirt. If you look after it, it will feed you forever. You're a smart one. I know you'll be okay come rain or shine. And remember, a business is only as good as its people, so treat them well. Our job is to plant seeds so our grandkids get to enjoy the fruit. So, eat well, Alice, and keep planting those seeds. Because how we eat today feeds tomorrow.
Yeah, so part of why I show you guys this commercial is it very closely hits a nice note for me, and to the point where I've started promoting the idea of Chobani futurism, which is a version of the future where you unite the pastoral and the technological. However, I think probably there will be no Chobani because ideally in that future we don't have much cow milk. Maybe we use a more synthetic alternative. But I showed this to a friend here at Fractal, and he saw this and basically said, "That's ridiculous. I don't want anything like that. It looks highly inefficient. You wouldn't use robots for those reasons. I don't think that's how people in the future should look." And he's got much more of like a cyberpunk kind of like goth aesthetic. And I say this just to draw out that I think if you guys are doing your job right, what we'll be creating is something more like a polyculture where a bunch of different visions can exist. So if you found in your pods when you were talking to your crews that you had conflicting visions, I think that's even possibly a positive thing because the containers that we're going to be building should be places where multiple can coexist and people can still work together. Do you have anything to say about pluralism before I go on?
Pluralism, good. Not in particular. I just think it's something we've valued a lot at Fractal to have lots of different subcultures and viewpoints, and we just have like a few shared values like kindness, and I think it can lead to a much richer life than being kind of siloed off somewhere.
Cool. So now that you've dreamed big, something that might come up, and certainly does for me when I start dreaming big, is a set of insecurities, like can I really do this? And then maybe also some confusions. So we want to cover this next. And for the next 6 minutes, we're going to do a little partner exercise. You want to introduce it?
So the way it works is it's a really, really simple exercise. It's just a sentence completion exercise. And so you'll get into pairs, and you'll basically say, I'm nervous about creating a neighborhood campus because I don't know if I want to live in the city long term. I'm nervous about creating a neighborhood campus because I'm worried it'll be a lot of work and I'll burn out. And then you just keep doing that sentence completion, and just kind of say the first thing that comes to mind until you run out of things to say. And then meanwhile, your partner is actively listening. And what they're doing is they are basically, if you want, you can take notes, or you can just, if you have a good memory, you can remember. But once you're done, they'll reflect back exactly what you said. So they'll say, okay, like you're nervous about creating a neighborhood campus because you don't know if you're going to stay in the city long term, and because you are worried about burning out. And then you switch pairs, or you switch to the other partner, and you basically do the exact same thing.
So now we're just going to do a share out, and we're curious, what did you guys come up with? What are some things that came up as hesitations or insecurities? And Priya and I can speak to some of them. We'll do it popcorn style.
I'm muted. Okay, one of mine was, I'm nervous about starting the program because it feels like if I'm playing a stewardship role and my role is to make sure other people don't get left behind, I might leave myself behind in that process. Who would fit everybody else and then forget to care for what do I truly want? Who makes me light up? Where do I want to be?
Yeah, I think this is like the most important thing that we might cover, actually. In both of our experience, it's really easy when you're doing community work to leave yourself behind and to get really burned out because you're constantly like sacrificing yourself for the good of the group. Our main advice is don't. Essentially, everything you're doing should be to try to create your ideal life, and by doing so, that will naturally include the people around you, and so that's what you're working on. We might also be worth talking about the no shoulds thing, right?
Yeah. We basically believe in this idea of no shoulds, which is a lot of people kind of get work done by using discipline, or kind of like in the workplace by setting deadlines and kind of enforcing them on each other. And we've found that people, when they start to work on Fractal, end up kind of doing that to each other very naturally. And we try to keep an eye out for it and just kind of tell people like, hey, you're shitting on yourself or you're shitting on others, and don't do that. And I also think that by keeping that orientation, you end up actually being hyper efficient about what you do because you don't do anything extraneous, basically. So one example is like at some point when we were starting Fractal University, one of us said, oh, like maybe we should have an Instagram. And then Tyler asked like, oh, well, does anyone actually like want to make the Instagram and maintain the Instagram? And it turns out that none of us who were working on it wanted that. And so it's kind of like, okay, well, if nobody wants to do it, then we just won't do it. And sometimes that happens with a full project. You have some project you're excited about, and then it turns out that nobody actually wants to do the work. And there's no reason to like make somebody do the work. You just don't do the thing. There's like, this is all just for fun. And I think when you have that orientation, the things you build, you will naturally be really excited about and enjoy. I think to your other point, this is leaving yourself behind in the process. Even as the steward, it's like To some degree, your role is like a little bit of curation. And so if somebody reaches out to you and you're just not that excited to meet up with them, there's many things you can do. Maybe you're like, oh, this person is like not really my kind of person, but I bet you Tyler would really love them. So you could kind of introduce them like, hey, I'm kind of busy or whatever. You could just say, but like, you should get coffee with my friend. You throw them in a group chat so you can redirect them. But also, if you're kind of like thinking about it and you're like, I don't even know who to introduce this person to. This person has weird vibes. I'm not sure if I'd be excited about them. You can kind of just like softly kind of redirect or reject them. Basically, just you don't need to like be open to anyone who's interested in the thing that you're doing. You should just focus on the people who make you excited, basically.
And another example of this is, for instance, on the Fractal NYC website, we have a Stay at Fractal forum, and we get like hundreds of people filling that out, like many, many people per month, like way more than we can respond to. So at the beginning, we felt some obligation to like get back to every person because it's polite and it's nice. But then eventually it was past our capacity to do so without burning out. So we put at the top of the form and also at the place like right before you click the form that you just might not hear back. And that's an example where it's like if we did the thing that maybe we should do, it might undermine the entire system because we'd get so burned out responding to people that we couldn't do other community work. Does that clarify things, Yuli? Cool. Okay, anybody else?
I think I'll go and I'll say I fear that I won't have much true friends and I'll be surrounded by a bunch of acquaintances.
Good one.
Mm-hmm. I feel like you have a good tweet about this. Tyler has this tweet where he basically says, like, the purpose of community. It's like nobody wants community. What they want is friendship. But also the way that you, like, find friends and make good friends is through community. So actually everybody does want community. And I think that's a really good way to explain it. There is a failure mode that I've seen people at Fractal go through, and I know it happens, is, like, people think that community is a substitute for friendship, but it's not. It's like a platform for friendship. It does make it way easier to make friends because it's just like you'll start to see the same people again and again, and that's just like one of the things that's kind of necessary to make friends. But it's also kind of on you as well to just like, find the people who you really like and go deep with them and invite them to hang out one-on-one and all of that stuff. And that might take a while. I mean, it took a while for us to kind of like find our people. I think we've all kind of felt that in various ways, and I felt that in the beginning at Fractal too. But ultimately, it's like when I think about my life now, I do have like 6 or 7 like really good friends who like I just really love, I really vibe with, and that's definitely like a lot for me. It's like a nice number, so it's definitely doable. I think it helps it a lot, but they're like kind of slightly separate but related things.
I also think one way to think about this project is like you're creating infrastructure for a friend network. And I think that really brings it into focus because you're not recruiting like community, like generic community members. You're ideally building relationships with people you really like, and other people are doing that too, and then you're giving them places to gather. And so I think there's one paradigm that a lot of community builders operate off of where they're just trying to like recruit anyone who will show up. And I think there's some wisdom to that. Like you kind of need enough people circulating and colliding at the beginning for relationships to form. But this also maybe falls under like the avoid burning yourself out thing. Like I'm mostly community building to have the people I love be near me and to spend more time with people I really like and get along with. And so I think under that frame, ideally you end up in a scenario where you're not just surrounded by acquaintances or friend acquaintances. Maybe we could take one more, if anybody has one.
One, I'll go. I can't remember if I said this or if someone else said this, but there's sort of like a fear that the amount of effort required to hit that sort of minimum viable level of traction, that minimum effort is like just beyond what I'm capable of managing, or Yeah, so I guess just a fear that like I'll be able to see like the light at the end of the tunnel, but not actually be able to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say for us, the minimum viable traction took a while in some ways, but also it was like before Andrew and I understood what we were building, and also like we didn't have a model for it. So part of the reason our goal with the program is you start together with a crew who's all kind of actively working towards this, and then hopefully it will create a lot of momentum in relatively short time. And we did work with 2 beta groups, and I feel like I am seeing that with them. So like Fractal Geneva has already kind of passed this point where they just like have this huge explosion of events, and one of them was telling me like I'm kind of overwhelmed. I can't attend all of these events. It's too much. Which you definitely don't have to attend all the events. You should just do what you want and do what is fun. But that happened pretty quickly for them within a couple of weeks. I think every city is different. Every scene is different, but I do think there's like a reasonable chance that by all working together, you'll end up kind of creating a flywheel.
Yeah, I also think a huge amount of traction at the beginning should not even come from you. It should come from, well, maybe you're the permissioning source. Like so much traction that we had at the beginning was from basically giving people permission to do the thing that they already wanted to do. So like this lady who wanted to host some kind of finger painting thing, she just needed a big living room to throw it in. And then a bunch of those people formed relationships that then went on to become part of Fractal. And then similarly, I threw this thing at one point called the Interdimensional Jamboree. It was maybe like a year after that time. And I just invited friends and friends of friends to like, this is kind of pre-Fractal U, to just come and for an hour do a workshop where they're jamming on something, whether it's a music jam. We also did a contact improv jam. We had a clowning jam, and then we had a jam, which was a bunch of people making jam. They were jamming on jam. And that brought in like a really wide array of people, some of whom formed their own independent relationships. And then a lot of those people also became like repeat visitors to Fractal, and then eventually Fractal University teachers. So I would say as much as possible, like if you can decentralize the amount of where the momentum is coming from, and you can put it into other people's hands, that'll make the initial flywheel a lot easier to spin up. If at any point you feel like you're the only tent pole holding the whole thing up, then definitely talk to us, because we can talk through some strategies where you put a bunch of other tent poles or columns or choose your own metaphor there.
Awesome. And so we have about 7 minutes left, so we're going to kind of move on to the last parts of our class. But if you did have insecurities you want to share, feel free to share them in any of the general channels, or if you want, you can DM Tyler or I as well.
Yeah. Okay, so now we'll talk about a bunch of common confusions that we see when people are thinking about starting communities or thinking about starting their own Fractal. We got a whole checklist here. I think we'll go through just 3 of them for now. The first one is governance. Often we see that when people want to start these things, they're like, okay, so it's going to have a DAO, and then people are going to vote in the DAO using like this special method, and they're going to use a really complicated Discord system with multiple video rooms to vote.
That's us.
That's us. But they're coming up with like all these kind of rules and explicit values and like ways of structuring the board of the thing. And this is another circumstance where that's like a lot of work, and we would just say, maybe don't do it. It's possible to just not do any of that.
Yeah, so for context, Fractal does not have any governance at all. There's no roles. I sometimes introduce myself as one of the founders of Fractal, and sometimes people have roles in that sense. So somebody will say, like, Tyler was one of the founders of Fractal U, or somebody runs our third space. But that's kind of just like the natural kind of way you'd introduce yourself for having done something. Nothing is kind of elected or anything like that. Nobody has any special powers over anyone else. And we have never voted on anything ever. It's just we have this model of MIDI dictatorships, which is like whoever is doing the thing like has complete ownership of the thing that they're doing. And so we have all these different apartments, and whoever's on the lease of each apartment gets to decide, what their apartment looks like and who's allowed in there and what events they host. Whoever runs our third spaces gets to decide all of those things as well. And that's just true at basically every level of Fractal. It's just a bunch of overlapping entities, and each of those overlapping entities, there's just like whoever is running it is in charge. I forget what else I was going to say. Yeah.
It's basically this federation model. And then individual organizations inside Fractal have their own hierarchies. Like the Tech Hub is a company, it has a CEO, employees, different roles, things like that. But then the social fabric linking all these different entities is just relationships. And that's what we recommend for the overall thing.
Yep.
Ideology. Yeah, so this is another thing that we see with a lot of communities starting, and I think it's not a bad thing. It's just a different type of community than what we're typically going for. So a lot of intentional communities will start by being like, okay, we're all effective altruists, or we're all Game B, or we're all MAGA, or something like that, and that will be the basis for the social fabric. We have found, and I've personally found, that this results in a lot more shallow social fabric, like social fabric of the sort where maybe people don't show up for one another when they're sick, don't support one another in finding like wives and husbands, don't help each other raise one another's kids. Like ideological social fabric tends to be good for gathering lots of people very quickly, but we find that when it comes, like push comes to shove, the real strong social fabric tends to be family bonds and also deep friendships. Is there anything you
Yeah.
want to say about that?
Well, and also I think like the thing we're trying to build is like a decades long project. And I think it's like your ideology might change over time, your interests might change over time. So I think, yeah, starting from that friendship thing makes it like much more longer lasting as everybody changes.
And one frame for this is it's the equivalent of kind of like building a village. So, when a village has existed for tens and or dozens of years, maybe even hundreds of years, typically there's not an overall ideology to the village. It's just an informal network of relationships that exists in a time and a place. We already covered no shoulds. Is there anything else that we should say on that?
No, that's okay. So the next one we want to talk about is inclusivity versus curation. So there's kind of a balance to be struck here, but kind of as to what we were saying earlier, like you should be really excited about the thing that you're doing, and therefore you don't need to create a perfectly inclusive community. In fact, we do not recommend it. You should basically kind of invite the people who you're excited to hang out with and build with. And that goes at every level. So whoever is the host for any event can just decide who they want to invite. We've also never had an event that, like, even though we sometimes call things Fractal Sunday Dinner or Fractal this, Fractal that, it's like actually when we hosted our weekly dinners, that was me and my husband co-hosting, and we decided who we would invite every week. Often it meant a lot of people who were co-living with us because we just already were friends with them. But if somebody was not our friend, they didn't get a default invite, and that's kind of just like the culture that we try to create at Fractal. You can't kind of like go to someone and be like, why wasn't I invited to the writing event? Because it's always up to the host to just like invite the people who they want to invite.
And this goes back again to kind of Yuli's thing of like, how do I do this without sacrificing myself? We're not trying to build communities of obligation, essentially. Like everything that people are building inside the community we're trying to do things that stem from desire and our natural draw toward other people. And so we think that this kind of thing can help with that, so that you're not feeling obligated with every event to invite like those 5 guys who are really cool, but maybe you just don't really enjoy being around them that much. And they can still be part of a broader community and a rich social fabric without necessarily everyone being at every event. Okay, so next steps are with Mondays, try to, if you can, show up with the whole crew. If you're busy and one person can't attend, see if you can have at least one person in the crew attend and then share out to the rest of the crew. It's also a good opportunity to let everyone know, or it's a good opportunity for everyone to eat dinner together if that's something that you're into. Anything else on Mondays?
That's it.
Okay, and then Wednesdays, that's when we're going to have specialized tracks, the labs. So session 1 is going to be, we're going to cover how to build a university, what we call here in New York City, Fractal University, and then also the co-living lab of how to get people living close to one another and create shared space. Those are going to be happening simultaneously. I'll do the university lab, Priya will do the co-living lab. And then session 2, which happens after that, Priya is going to talk about creating a weekly event. I'm going to talk about how to be a good switchboard operator, which is kind of like a super connector role. And during these 2 sessions, both will be simultaneous. So ideally send one person of your crew to each lab if you have a crew of 4. If you have a crew of 3 or less, you might have one person who takes multiple tracks.
Or you can skip a track. Each of the tracks does involve a lot of work during the actual lab and then also during the week. Also, if you're trying to do back-to-back labs, that's literally 3 hours of class. It's quite a lot. So I would also encourage you to just think about what are the labs that are most important to us right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then last but not least, we have some optional materials, readings, and media and things like that you guys might find inspiring. Ignore them if you're too busy, but there's some really good stuff in there. One that I'll call out is this amazing documentary called Spaceship Earth. Has anyone seen that? I see you smiling, Melissa. Isn't it? It's freaking amazing. Everyone I show this to gets insanely inspired. It's this crew called the Synergists who started as a theater troupe of like a kind of ragtag band in the late 60s. And they went from there to build a seafaring ship from scratch, having no experience in doing anything like that. And then they sailed it around the world, starting businesses in every major biome, until eventually their whole thing culminated in building a $200 million human terrarium with multiple ecosystems where they played like Noah's Ark, bringing species from across the earth. And the idea was to try to create a habitat where humanity could function in outer space and still have like air to breathe and plants to eat from and things like that. It's really wild, and they're all still alive. We visited them in New Mexico. Really worth checking out with your, I would say this is like, if you're going to have a movie night with your crew, check this out. Okay, and that is it. Can you see the little fractal?
Oh,
yeah. Sweet.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. This was great. We'll see you all Wednesday. If anybody has any questions, Tyler and I will stay on the call for a few minutes. But yeah, otherwise we'll see you Wednesday.
All right. See you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, all.
Yeah.